Next up, it's a street name that's become as synonymous with Fenway Park as the Green Monster, the Pesky's Bowl. But for years, many have argued that Yawkey Way pays tribute to a racist history. Now the Red Sox themselves agree. Last year, Red Sox owner John Henry told the Boston Herald, quote, "For me personally, the street name has always been a consistent reminder that it is our job to ensure the Red Sox are not just multicultural, but stand for as many of the right things in our community as we can. I am still haunted by what went on here a long time before we arrived." Last month, the Sox filed a petition with the Public Improvement Commission to change Yawkey Way back to Jersey Street, which is what it was called until '77, when it was renamed for former team owner Tom Yawkey, who died the year before. Opponents of the name change are some of the most prominent people in town. That commission will take up the issue this Thursday. Joining me for a preview are Howard Bryant. Howard's a columnist for ESPN Magazine and NPR Weekend Edition correspondent. He's also the author of Shut Out, a story of race and baseball in Boston. It's good to meet you, Howard. Thanks for being here. And the Reverend Dr. Hammond, founder of Boston's Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church and a Yawkey Foundation trustee. Reverend, it's good to see you, too.
Hey, Jim. Good to be here.
Why change it, Howard?
Well, I think if you're John Henry, it's your prerogative to do so. I think that if you've had the team for 16 years, you've won 3 championships. I really don't have a stake in this at all, but I can understand the point of view from that position that you want to make your stamp on this team. You've done everything that you could possibly do. You're probably the most successful owners this franchise have ever had. On the other hand, the big question for me is, does this team belong to the Henry Group, or does it belong to the city?
And if it belongs, regardless of what you determine, do you buy his argument on the merits that Yawkey's history is so racist that it taints the Red Sox in 2018, and to make it inclusive and welcoming, that the name's got to be changed?
John Henry and I talked about this 16 years ago when he first bought the team, and he said to me, "I can make you one promise. What we were before, we are not going to be any longer." And I think that they've accomplished that mission, despite what's gone on with Adam Jones, despite some other things that have taken place in the city. There is one thing about this, and I'm not a fan of scrubbing history and of making things seem like yesterday doesn't exist, certainly. The Yawkey name carries that history. Every time you bring up Tom Yawkey, every time you bring up the Yawkey name and you associate it with the Boston Red Sox, you do go back to that history, and there's no getting around that.
Before we get to the other side, Reverend, I should note that we have a Yawkey Theater right here at WGBH as well. Yawkey Foundation gave a $7 million grant for that. You not only think, your position, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is this whole racism attached to Yawkey is totally misplaced, do you not?
I do, yeah. I mean, I think in the sense that there's no question that the Red Sox were last, no question that they had clearly racist managers who were pretty explicit about it. It's not clear to me that they were that much different from much of what was going on in baseball.
They weren't.
They were not.
Well, last makes them different.
Last as much because Earl Wilson got drafted by the Marines as anything else. Otherwise, they would have been third from last. So we end up making these huge decisions about what people are or are not, devoid of any reference to the times, the context. And I think we end up miring ourselves in things that aren't going to take us forward.
I want to understand, when you say the time, though, that suggests to me you think there was some racism.
Oh, absolutely.
But
I don't
on the part of Yawkey, I'm talking.
No. I don't think Tom was racist. I look at Bill Nolan's newest book out, and he can't find much evidence for that. I don't think he called Jackie Robinson the N-word, personally. And I do think that's right. And I think if you look at what records we found now, both from the Globe archives and so on, there were efforts. Could have been more, should have been more. No question about it.
But Reverend, if you had a corporate executive sitting here tonight who said, "I don't have any black employees, but I tried. I offered this guy a job. He went in the Marines. I offered 3 other guys a job. Wouldn't your position be, try harder? That's not an excuse."
I'm not disagreeing that the Red Sox and most of Major League Baseball should have absolutely tried harder. I'm glad they tried when they did, because they were actually ahead of the media groups that are now criticizing them, like the Boston Globe. I mean, so let's be honest about what was really going on here.
Yeah, but we should also be honest. I'm sorry, Jim.
Yeah,
we should also be honest about what we're really talking about.
What's that?
What we're really talking about, we're not talking about whether Tom Yawkey was the person who said whatever he said during Jackie Robinson's tryout. What you're really talking about is you're talking about the history of the Boston Red Sox and how they dealt with black players. Not just Yawkey, but the entire franchise up until the 90s and the 2000s, up until John Henry bought that team. Tom Yawkey died in 1976, but the Red Sox didn't sign a black free agent until 1992. So whether you're talking about Mo Vaughn or Jim Rice or Oil Canada, the experience of the African-American player in Boston has always been a very, very difficult one. And that is what gets tied to the Yawkey name. It's not whether or not Tom Yawkey said or did anything. It's what took place under the umbrella of that name.
So what do we achieve by changing the name, particularly based upon the fact that you say it went well beyond Yawkey? What is achieved, Howard?
Well, I think what gets achieved is, I think John Henry and the Red Sox organization, they feel like they've accomplished, well, we've erased the Yawkey name on our stationery. We've erased the Yawkey name in terms of the destination of the ballpark. And what we've done is we've created a sort of demarcating line. I don't think it does much more than help John Henry, because people will associate. The Yawkey name is an iconic name in the city of Boston. But it does make a statement. What it does say is we are going to eliminate we're going to make a statement about our feeling about that name and the relationship to this ballpark.
You know, Reverend, the thing I don't understand, from having followed this from the outside as opposed to the inside like you, why can't we have it both ways? The Red Sox themselves praised the wonderful work and contributions of the Yawkey Foundation to the city. They'll continue to praise them. Why can't John Henry change the name of his street to make a statement to African Americans who walk into that park at the same time that they celebrate the work that the Yawkey Foundation has done here and elsewhere throughout the city for years?
My point, and I think the argument I would make over and over again, is we're not going to make racial progress by trying to pretend that our history doesn't exist.
So we shouldn't have taken down those Confederate statues in the South?
When people erect statues to intimidate people, they ought to come down. When we have to deal with the fact that some of our heroes, when one of the greatest philanthropists of the city, also had some flaws and faults, I don't think we have to take their name down. I don't have to take Lincoln's monument down because he wanted to ship blacks back to Africa. I don't have to take Washington's name down because he was a slave owner.
But, Reverend, can I repeat something that I mentioned in the first panel here tonight? You saw the Spotlight series in the Globe, where we were the least welcoming city voted by blacks across this country.
Absolutely.
You don't think Fenway is one of the biggest tourist attractions in this city, too. You don't think a message is sent if that commission votes on Thursday to change the name to African Americans around this country? Maybe Boston is different.
Absolutely
Symbols
not.
do matter.
Boston has been different for a very long time.
Blacks don't see it that way across this country.
I don't think so. But Boston,
you saw the polling numbers that I saw?
No, I'm saying that's currently the case, but I'm saying that doesn't start with Tom Yawkey. It goes back to the disappointment in the distance between Boston's progressivism and the fact that it has been racially hot and troubling since the 19th century.
Yeah, I actually think if you want to make a statement, I think that would send a message. It would certainly send a message. There's no question about that. But if you really want to send a message, then you send a message based on how you treat people when they go into that ballpark.
That's exactly right.
That's the key. The key, especially when I was a kid growing up here, we did not even go to Fenway Park.
Why?
It was considered a hostile place. And when the few times that I went there as a kid, it was, they didn't want us there. But now I think when you go to Fenway, if you've got the money, if you can afford to go to Fenway, I think now it's a place where everybody is welcome.
And you don't think, well, let's, instead of the outsider, we only have 30 seconds left. If you're that little black kid today, the Howard Bryant today, and you hear on your ESPN tonight or on Nesson or on Comcast Sportsnet that the name of the street has been changed for this reason, doesn't it send a message to that little kid too?
That little kid probably doesn't even know who Tom Yawkey was. The message is how you get treated when you go into that ballpark and how the Red Sox treat the African-American community.
You get the last word.
I would hope that we could learn to handle this the way the Jackie Robinson Foundation handled it. They've sent a letter to the Public Improvement Commission saying, we don't support that change. We have, since 1980, been working together to talk about what's going on and how we get better. We've been working on scholarships for students. We've been working on looking at our history and learning from it. The Yawkey Foundation and the Jackie Robinson Foundation have been working together for 3 decades. When does Boston stop recrimination and revenge and really start thinking about the future?
We'll find out on Thursday. Howard, it's good to meet you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Reverend. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.